Hi, hello everyone. How are you doing today? I'm Hidemi Woods. こんにちは。I am a singer-songwriter based in Japan, and I'm maybe later. Thanks. Um, I have my podcast channel titled Talking and Reading from Japan. And in that, I read a passage of the memoirs that I wrote and talk about it. And I record that podcast regularly. And today is my recording day. And on this live cast, I show you behind the scenes of my podcast recording. And so this is my podcast preparation. And later on, I'll actually record the podcast show of mine. And on this live cast, you can see me prepare and record and finish the my podcast show. So I hope you enjoy with me on this my podcast behind the scenes live cast. As I said, I'm a singer and songwriter based in Japan. And on my podcast, I read my memoirs I wrote. And on those memoirs, I mainly write about my childhood, things that happened to me or about my family members or my relatives, everything mixed with Japanese culture, Japanese daily habits, common practices. And so I think for some of those who are listening to this, my episodes sound maybe a little bit unique because it's Japanese culture is quite different from other countries' cultures. So I hope you can enjoy that from that perspective, not only by my childhood episodes, but also those Japanese common practices and Japanese people's habits. I guess I can introduce them along with my actual memories. Now, I'm getting on the preparation for today's recording. In my podcast show, I read one passage at a time and talk about it, and then on to the next show. So on one recording, I record 2 shows, and today I'm gonna record two shows of my talking and reading from Japan. And you can, I live cast the whole thing during the recording. And during the recording, I focused on my podcast show. But between the recordings and also after the recording, I can come back. I'll come back here to you. And if on folks watching this on Beagle Live, you can give me a comment or a question if you have. And then I'd be happy to answer your comment or question after the recording is all done. So when I finished recording today's shows, and if I happen to find your comment or question here, I'll be happy to answer them. So please feel free to give me any comment if you have. And and on Instagram, on YouTube, everybody there, how are you doing? And I hope you also enjoy with me today. Okay, let's start the preparation for today's my podcast show. Today I'll read, like I said, one of my memoirs. Today's memoir I wrote is titled "The Girl in Kyoto." It looks like this. And this photo was taken by me, and this is actually the house I grew up in. And it's an I was born and raised in a city, Kyoto in Japan. Some of you may have heard of it or may know about Kyoto, but it's a historical old city of Japan. It's located in the western part of Japan, and I lived there with my family until I was 21 years old, when I decided to be a singer and songwriter and moved to Tokyo. And my house, in my house, I lived with my grandparents and my parents and my sister. And in this memoir, I wrote about my family a lot. And today's episodes, I read 2 episodes today. And in those episodes, it's about my family members, especially my grandfather appears mainly. And so as a preparation for today's recording, I'll start with rough reading of today's part of this memoir. And so you will listen to the same episode twice. One in this rough reading, and the second time in the actual recording. Now I'll read today's episode. My home where I spent my childhood had a front yard that was larger than the house itself. My grandfather was absorbed in growing chrysanthemums in the yard, and there were over 600 chrysanthemum pots. Our yard was literally packed with his chrysanthemums. He even built a vinyl hothouse in the yard to take care of them in the wintertime. Chrysanthemums were all over the place, and they had pretty much disrupted the family members' lives, including mine. Whenever a typhoon approached, my grandfather would order my father to bring his chrysanthemums into the house and the garage. Whenever a display takes place, my father would load and carry the chrysanthemums for my grandfather into an amusement park or botanical garden by his truck. When I wanted to have a dog, my grandfather didn't allow me because it would ravage his chrysanthemums. For my I resisted and said it was unfair that he could keep so many chrysanthemums while I couldn't keep one dog. He told me it was totally fair because this was his house, not mine. My father felt pity for me and made a playing space on the rooftop of the garage when we rebuilt the house. My sister and I got our small yard, but my grandfather's chrysanthemum pots had gradually crept up, and soon the rooftop was also occupied with them. I was playing by the row of chrysanthemum pots in the yard one day and carelessly broke a sprig. I was terrified, as it meant a death penalty for me. I couldn't even imagine how furious my grandfather would get. I was no George Washington and hid away the broken sprig. Although I spent dreadful hours, my grandfather, to my surprise, wasn't so angry with me when he found it. He could have ranted and raved, considering his devotion to the chrysanthemums. I still wonder why he could have forgiven me. That's today's first episode for my podcast show. Now, I'll give it a title for this show. It's quite easy, don't you think? I guess my grandfather's chrysanthemums will do. What do you think? Okay. This one's title will be my grandfather's chrysanthemums. So I've done rough reading, and the title was decided now the actual recording will be starting now. For the recording, first of all, I turn on the camera. For the podcast recording, because it's totally different from the live cast with you. This is a recording session. Okay, the camera is set. Now I'll get on the recording. So after the recording, I will come back to you. So let's do the recording of my podcast show together, shall we? Okay. Oops. Okay, start recording. Hi, welcome to Talking and Reading from Japan. I'm your host, Hidemi Woods. Here, I'll read part of my books I wrote and talk about it or anything I feel like talking to you. I hope you enjoy with me. Today, I'll read one of my memoirs titled The Girl in Kyoto. This memoir of mine is introduced my actual memories of my childhood, and everything in it actually happened to me. It's not a fiction, and it's everything happened to me exactly as it is written. And today I'll read one of the episodes of my childhood. And today's episode is called My Grandfather's Chrysanthemums. Today's episode is My Grandfather's Chrysanthemums. It's about, today's episode is about our family's disrupted life by my grandfather's chrysanthemums. My grandfather's chrysanthemums. My home where I spent my childhood had a front yard that was larger than the house itself. My grandfather was absorbed in growing chrysanthemums in the yard, and there were over 600 chrysanthemum pots. Our yard was literally packed with his chrysanthemums. He even built a vinyl hothouse in the yard to take care of them in the winter time. Chrysanthemums were all over the place, and they had pretty much disrupted the family members' lives, including mine. Whenever a typhoon approached, my grandfather would order my father to bring his chrysanthemums into the house and the garage. Whenever a display takes place, my father would load and carry the chrysanthemums for my grandfather into an amusement park or a botanical garden by his truck. When I wanted to have a dog, my grandfather didn't allow me because it would ravage his chrysanthemums. I resisted and said it was unfair that he could keep so many chrysanthemums while I couldn't keep one dog. He told me it was totally fair because this was his house, not mine. My father felt pity for me and made a playing space on the rooftop of the garage when we rebuilt the house. My sister and I got our small yard, but my grandfather's chrysanthemum pots had gradually crept up, and soon the rooftop was also occupied with them. I was playing by the row of chrysanthemum pots in the yard one day and carelessly broke a sprig. I was terrified, as it meant a death penalty for me. I couldn't even imagine how furious my grandfather would get. I was no George Washington and hid away the broken sprig. Although I spent dreadful hours, my grandfather, to my surprise, wasn't so angry with me when he found it. He could have ranted and raved, considering his devotion to the chrysanthemums. I still wonder why he could have forgiven me. That was today's episode. My grandfather was a dictator or a king of my family. He ruled a tight reign over us, other family members, and we acted as if we were all his servants, not his family, because he was so strict and scary. So no one in my family talked him back. We just followed his instructions or his rules quietly and nodding our heads whatever he told us unreasonable things. We were all yes men, yes persons to him. And especially my family was a farmer, and when I was really little, my parents were working on the field. Our family had fields. We had 2 lots or 3, a couple of fields near the house. So they were farming out there with my grandfather. And my grandmother was staying at home to take care me and later my sister. and my grandmother was doing those domestic tasks, and I was I was raised by my grandmother, and then my grandfather was getting older, so he kind of retired from the farming work, and my parents went to the fields for farming, and my grandfather began his hobby of growing chrysanthemums. And that was the start of the problem. He really devoted his passion into chrysanthemums. And so we, other members of his family, were all his servants, and as his servants, we just cooperate. We just had to cooperate his growing of chrysanthemums. So we were lower than his chrysanthemums as a living status. And so my grandfather treasured all his chrysanthemums. There were quite a various different kinds of chrysanthemums all over our yard. And he picked the best ones to display to show his best work every possible opportunity. So he around Kyoto area, he just displayed his chrysanthemums pretty much everywhere that had chrysanthemum displays. So his chrysanthemums were all over my place, and also the main botanical display places. And especially my father, he was Smithers to my grandfather, as in The Simpsons, and he just followed my grandfather's instructions obediently, and my father did everything as my grandfather told him to do, including his own life choices. And so, especially for his chrysanthemums, my father had to walk around for my grandfather, because my grandfather didn't have a driver's license. So my father had to move around had to carry his chrysanthemums to anywhere my grandfather told him to go for the displays. And especially when a typhoon or the storm approached, the big fuss occurred in my family because my grandfather was nearly panicking about how to save his chrysanthemums, how to keep his chrysanthemums out of damage. And so he just strictly ordered that my father should protect his chrysanthemums by moving all of them into the house or garage or anywhere the roof could cover them. And even after his hard work, the whole day of his hard work on the farm, my father, after he came home from work, he had to work so hard to carry heavy chrysanthemum pots one by one into the house or garage or everywhere, and just it's like so I was little, but that action of my father seemed so pitiful, and I wondered why he told my grandfather no once in a while. I had never heard him saying to my grandfather, I didn't want to do that. He just followed my grandfather's order every time. And it's not, my grandfather's attitude was not asking or would you mind or anything like that. He just dictated. He very strictly ordered to my father. So it's move the chrysanthemums, protect chrysanthemums. ちゃんとやっとけよ in Japanese. And so it was a mystery for me why my father ever talked back to my grandfather or said no or got angry with him. And speaking of anger, I was just so amazed when my grandfather didn't scold me when I carelessly damage his chrysanthemum. I broke a sprig one day. That was the first and the only time I damaged his chrysanthemum. And I was just so scared. I horrified what I should do. I even thought I had to leave the house and live somewhere else by myself. And I couldn't tell him. I just hid the broken sprig and but I knew he would find it sooner or later. And actually, he found it pretty quickly, and he approached me and told me that you broke the sprig of that chrysanthemum, didn't you? And I said yes. And I was waiting for my execution for the death penalty. And then my grandfather told me, don't do that ever again. All right? And I said, yes, I wouldn't. I understand. I wouldn't do that again, I promise. And he went away. That was it. I wasn't scolded. I wasn't yelled by him or shouted by him. Just that was all, and I was saved. My life was saved. But thinking of his strong devotion to his own chrysanthemums, I still really don't understand why he forgave me. That was the first time I thought I may have misunderstood my grandfather's character. And later on, I would find it was true. I mean, I was right. He was when I decided to leave the house, decided to be a musician and leave the house for Tokyo, everyone in my family opposed strongly, and they told me they wouldn't allow me to do that. But my grandfather was the only one who said, you can go. He was the one who let me become a musician like I am today. So after all, I owe my grandfather a lot. Huge. Okay, that was today's episode and my talking today. Thanks for listening. If you are interested, my other books or my songs and other my blogs or SNS, all those links are available on my website, hidemiwoods.com, HIDEMI woods.com. And there I even have links to my merchandise of my original brand, Erizen. And there you can find the items that feature my own illustrations, my own design. So everything else, everything is on my website. So if you like, please visit there. Thanks again. I'm Hidemi Woods. Until next time, take care and be well. Well, that was today's first recording. It's now done. Are you still there? Are you staying there? For those who are just joining me, I'm recording my podcast show, and on this live cast, I'm showing you the behind the scenes of the recording of the show. So now that I finished the first recording, I'll get on to the second recording of the day. The second recording is also for the episode from the same book, The Girl in Kyoto, that I wrote. That's a memoir of mine. And again, I'll start with rough reading, and then I'll decide the title, and then start recording. Let's get on to the second one together, shall we? Okay. Now, the second episode of the day will be like this. Now, rough reading will be starting. My grandfather liked to go out very much. When I still lived with him in my hometown, he was dressed with a flashy red tie to go out one day. He showed off his new tie to my parents and me while saying, "You had better dress showily to look young as you get older." We frowned on him but didn't oppose him as usual. I just asked him where he was going with such a flamboyant tie, and he told me that he was seeing his girlfriend. It became customary for him to have coffee with her at a cafe inside an expensive hotel. To me, it sounded a date, but my grandmother didn't care at all. His girlfriend was an old widowed woman named Miss Tamada. He talked about her so much that almost everything he was talking about had gotten to be something related to her. He began to have her over, and I often saw her in our house. She became a good friend of my grandmother too, who usually hated others. She and my grandparents would talk for hours about mainly one topic. That was how honorable and virtuous my grandfather was. As a person who doubted it, I chuckled whenever I overheard them. She raved about my grandfather every time she saw me, which was so annoying. Since she exalted him immensely, my grandparents are absorbed in her visits, while other members of my family, my parents, my sister, and I, felt quite unpleasant. Four of us were taking a trip to Europe, our first ever overseas travel, to celebrate my graduation from high school. My grandparents were to stay at home, and they invited Miss Tamada to see us off on the day of our departure. When we were about to leave home, she made fuss and rapture as if we had been headed for space. She took pictures of us leaving, continually congratulated us, and ruined our starting part of the trip. We really didn't know her, yet she acted like a close member of our family. We set off sullenly by being seen off by a stranger. This was today's second recording, and now I'll think of the title of this episode. And I think this one will be easy too, because this is about my grandfather's girlfriend, Miss Tamada. So, the title will be My Grandfather's Girlfriend. Don't you think? Okay, then the title is My Grandfather's Girlfriend. And now I'm done with rough reading and deciding the title, and so it's time for recording of the show, and you will staying with me while I'm recording, watching me recording the show. So that means I'll record my podcast with you all. Let's begin, shall we? Now I turn on the camera again. There are many cameras around me. And camera on. Okay, it's on. Okay, I think preparation is all done, and only the recording remains. After recording this show, I'll come back to you and talk to you again. So please stay there. Don't leave me, please. Okay. Let's do this. Hi, welcome to Talking and Reading from Japan. I'm your host, Hidemi Woods. Here I'll read part of my books I wrote and talk about it or anything that pops up in my mind. I hope you enjoy with me. Today I read one of my memoirs titled The Girl in Kyoto. This is one of my memoirs. I wrote quite a few memoirs and published them. And today's episode is from this book is what happened when I was a teenager. Today's episode is called My Grandfather's Girlfriend. It's about a girlfriend of my grandfather who appeared suddenly in my family's life when my grandfather was getting old. My grandfather's girlfriend. My grandfather liked to go out very much. When I still lived with him in my hometown, he was dressed with a flashy red tie to go out one day. He showed off his new tie to my parents and me while saying, "You had better dress showily to look young as you get older." We frowned on him but didn't oppose him as usual. I just asked him where he was going with such a flamboyant tie, and he told me that he was seeing his girlfriend. It became customary for him to have coffee with her at a cafe inside an expensive hotel. To me, it sounded a date, but my grandmother didn't care at all. His girlfriend was an old widowed woman named Miss Tamada. He talked about her so much that almost everything he was talking about had gotten to be something related to her. He began to have her over and often saw her in her house. She became a good friend of my grandmother too, who usually hated others. She and my grandparents would talk for hours about mainly one topic, that was how honorable and virtuous my grandfather was. As a person who doubted it, I chuckled whenever I overheard them. She raved about my grandfather every time she saw me, which was so annoying. Since she exalted him immensely, my grandparents were absorbed in her visits, while other members of my family, my parents, my sister, and I, felt quite unpleasant. 4 of us were taking a trip to Europe, our first ever overseas travel, to celebrate my graduation from high school. My grandparents were to stay at home, and they invited Ms. Tamada to see us off on the day of our departure. When we were about to leave home, she made a fuss in rapture as if we had been headed for space. She took pictures of us leaving, continually congratulated us, and ruined our starting part of the trip. We really didn't know her, yet she acted like a close member of our family. We set off sullenly by being seen off by a stranger. That was today's episode. My grandfather had a girlfriend suddenly when he was over 75 years old or so. And I don't know where they met, but it was his first girlfriend since he got married with my grandmother. And he went out with her for coffee and talked with her for hours over coffee and came home. So it's just his going out with his date. To me, it sounded like that. And I one day asked my grandmother, if it bothered her, but she said she didn't care. It didn't bother her at all. And so my grandmother was an interesting person. She wasn't interested in people at all. She liked to be alone, and she didn't have a friend. She just hated other people. So she was comfortable being alone, much more comfortable than being with others. And so naturally, she hated to go out. She just staying home was her liking. And she was just watching TV all day, or sewing or mending something, and cleaning something. And that was more fun for her than going out and meeting people. But my grandfather was complete opposite to her. He barely stayed home. He just acted as if he was drawn by a magnet or something, and he just went outside, and he usually went out, and of course he didn't have any task or purpose to go out. He just needed to go out. Going out is his job. And one day he made a girlfriend, and he brought her, he invited her to our house. And then, strangely, my grandmother and his girlfriend hit so well together. They became a close friend. I was stunned that a person like my grandmother, who had no friend whatsoever, made a friend with her husband's girlfriend. So weird. And they got along so well, although my grandmother was getting along pretty much nobody in her life. But she liked my grandfather's girlfriend so much. And every time Ms. Tamada, my grandfather's girlfriend, visited our house, three of them, my grandparents and Ms. Tamada, were talking so happily, merrily, pleasantly. It's like, it was like other house I was entering in. So my usually quiet, somber house was like lighting up by Ms. Tamada's visit. And my grandparents were talking and chattering, and they looked so happy. That was unusual as well. And because that my grandparents liked her, mainly because Ms. Tamada praised my grandfather unnecessarily, greatly well. I mean, she raved about my grandfather's personality, my grandfather's deeds that were not so much, and just she was a big fan of my grandfather's. So she just kept admiring him and talking about how great my grandfather was, which was not true at all. He was a scary dictator of my house. He was a strong ruler of my house. So I couldn't help laughing at Ms. Tamada's comments about my grandfather, because how blind she was, I thought. If she had lived with him, she wouldn't have commented that way, I thought. And I wondered what kind of glasses could see him like Ms. Tamada described. None of what Ms. Tamada talked about my grandfather was true. And she completely misunderstood my grandfather. But every time I bumped into her inside my house, she just stopped me and say how wonderful my grandfather was and how lucky I was as his granddaughter. And I just chuckled along because I never thought that way. I wished I were a different person's granddaughter. Why my grandfather of all the grandfathers on earth? Why my grandfather was like that? Why I was chosen as his granddaughter? I thought that every day as a child. So that that made Ms. Tamada's comments funnier. So it's just comedy to me. And then my grandfather was talking about only himself when we had meals together, like lunch or dinner time. He didn't listen to other members talking. He just talked about himself. He bragged about what he did in the past, or he just bragged about, or he just told us his entire day. That was not interesting at all to us. We just had to be quiet and listening to his rambling while we were eating our dinner. It's like a torture, and every night we had to listen to my grandfather speaking about trash, and and then after he met Ms. Tamada, his talking changed. He began to talk about Ms. Tamada, not himself. And the cafe they went together, or the talk they had together, just our dinner time was filled with Ms. Tamada's stories. And that was more more uninteresting to us, because she was a stranger to us. So why we should listen to the happenings or stories or anything about a stranger while we were eating? We couldn't stand for the stories about my grandfather, but now we had to endure the stories about a stranger. And so our meal times were worse and worse every day. And then when we went on a trip to Europe, she happened to visit my grandparents and ruined our departure, she just clapped her hands and applauded, and she was taking pictures continuously because they are going to Europe. They were going to Europe. I wondered. I couldn't understand what was happening to us. Why we were being seen off by a stranger. And but good thing was my grandmother finally found her friend, and at least they seemed happy after Ms. Tamada came into their life. But except my grandparents, for other members of my family were so tiresome, so annoying existence Ms. Tamada was. But my grandfather kept seeing her outside, also kept inviting her into our house, and they had very good time together for a couple of years. And I heard Ms. Tamada's son worked at Nintendo. I don't know if it's true or false, but at least she told me so. As like she was so proud, too proud of her son to stay not comment on it. She just needed to brag about his son, and I heard that. But and so maybe it was true because she brought us whenever she came to our house, she brought playing cards. And back in those days, Nintendo didn't develop any game soft. Nintendo was a toy company back then, not a game company. And so she came to our house by bringing playing cards as a gift, visiting gift. But as you can imagine, there's no we don't need so many playing cards, do we? Playing cards don't get tattered so easily, so we don't have to replace them so frequently. So I thought 2 decks or 3 decks of playing cards are enough. But on every visit, Ms. Tamada brought a deck of playing cards. So our house, especially my grandparents' room, was filled with playing cards. And I wondered what use of that numerous uncountable decks of cards. What for? But my grandparents' room had so many playing cards, so that my grandparents looked like collectors of playing cards, and was so funny because it's not a special deck or something particular designed deck. It's just an ordinary deck of cards, but my grandparents' room was getting more and more playing cards, and whenever I happen to peek into their room, there always a new deck of playing cards, and playing cards are everywhere on the TV set or on the drawers or on the bookshelves. Bookshelves were filled with playing cards, like more than playing cards were there than books themselves. So Miss Tamada was my grandfather's girlfriend, and also playing cards provider for our family. Well, that was all for today. Thanks for listening. I'm Hidemi Woods. If you are interested in my books and songs and blogs or SNS, all the links are available on my website. So if you like, visit hidemiwoods.com, HIDMI woods.com. I also put up some links to my original merchandise that features my illustrations or my designs. And so if you like, look into it as well. Thanks again. Until next time, take care and be well. Okay, the second recording is done. That means today's recording of my podcast show is all done. Whew. Are you there? Were you staying there? Were you doing it with me? The whole thing? I hope you can enjoy with me. So, like I said, I record my podcast show on a regular basis, and every time I'm showing the behind the scenes of the recording on this live cast. So I hope someone gave me a comment. Question: is your book selling in Japan? Yes. I mean, yes and no. You can order my book from Japan, for instance, like through Amazon. And so not on the bookstore. It's not available at a bookstore, but online you can get it in Japan or everywhere else in that matter. So I hope, thanks for your comment and your interest in my book. I appreciate it. So if you like, you check it out online. Thanks. And what I was saying, yeah. So I'm doing this on a regular basis. So if you like, follow me follow this live cast, and so that I can see you again, talk to you again. If you like, follow me, please. And I like, as I answered the question someone kindly gave me. I'm so grateful if you have a comment or a question about anything, not my book or not my songs or anything, just about Japanese culture or Japanese daily life would be welcome. So feel free to ask me anything. In Japan, the rainy season started. I think last time I saw you here, I talked to you about the rainy season also. And that time I think I said the rainy season is coming soon. And now it's in. The rainy season has come, and not every day, but pretty much almost every day it's cloudy or rainy. And I ran into a trouble last week. Last week I took a trip to the city, and that trip was why I took a trip to the city was I had earned some miles of a airline company. It accumulated, and until 9 years ago, I took overseas travel, and during those days, miles, the airline company's miles program accumulated, and so the expiration date was approaching for the miles I had earned, and I needed to spend them somewhere. And I booked a hotel with the miles, so it was a trip for a free night at a hotel. And I set off in a high note, and I dropped by a shopping mall before I reached a destination to have my hair cut. I live in a rural small town in Japan, now. And my town is too rural that to have a decent beauty salon. And when I need a haircut, I need to go on a trip because there's no hair salon nearby of my house. So I seized the opportunity of a trip as an opportunity of my haircut. And so I dropped by a beauty salon inside the shopping mall. And while I was having my haircut, rain started to fall fiercely. And that was almost a storm. I couldn't see anything. That view was wiped out with drops of rain. Drops were huge, and the amount of rain was incredible. And it was impossible to walk back to the train station, even though I had an umbrella. There was no way to walk toward the station. So I waited for the rain to subside inside the shopping mall 2 hours, for 2 hours. And then it subsided. And I got back to the station to take a train to the final destination. And there I found the local train operation was suspended. The local train had been stopped due to the severe rain. And they didn't have any plan to resume the operation. So no one knew when the train started running again. And I couldn't wait for the whole day inside the station. So that station happened to have the bullet train station inside. The bullet train station and the local train station coexisted in that station. And so I had to. There was no other way to get to the destination other than taking the bullet train. As some of you know, the bullet train cost so much. And but I had to pay for the bullet train because the bullet train operation was normal. And I paid extra. It just took me 10 minutes to get to the destination. But for that 10 minutes, I paid 3,000 yen more in dollars, $20 more. $20 for only 10 minutes because of the rain. And I wondered, the same rain was falling, but the bullet train was running normally, and the local train was stopped in the middle of the same amount of the rain. And I smelled something profitable or something a scheme of making passengers pay more scheme. I mean, why the local train stopped while the bullet train was running normally? I smelled something sales-oriented scheme there. And I paid more by falling into that scheme. I shouldn't have dropped by the beauty salon. That haircut cost me so much. Eventually, my haircut was the reason I had to pay for the bullet train. But who would think the rain would start falling on that strength, that fiercely during my haircut? I couldn't foresee that coming. But I lost $20 for that. That was my last week's regret. Well, I was enjoying with you, talking to you. So next time, I hope you come back here. And again, I want you to hear me rambling or chattering, and I wish you find it interesting or funny or just feeling like spending time with me again. Thanks again. I really appreciate you are dropping by here today. See you again soon. Take care. And see you soon, and stay peaceful, stay safe, and take care. Until then, bye for now. さようなら。